Greetings, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. Thank you so much. We're going to record this video is a training video to go over the monthly contract monitoring tool in the beginning half, and then Civicor, the process for entering people in Civicor in the back half. So if you're just here for Civicor, you can kind of fast forward. If you're just here for monthly contract monitoring tool, you can just watch the first half of it. But before we get started, just a couple of quick introductions. So my name is Alex Clayton. I'm the Criminal Justice Data Evaluation and Monitoring Program Coordinator, which is a really big title for the data guy. So I handle all the data stuff for all the criminal justice programs at the BHA, including the JBBS program. I've been with BHA for about a year, and I've been working really closely with both Becky and Kelly as the program managers to make sure that all these data tools are kind of useful. We've revamped them a lot. We've kind of cut them down in places, made it easier. And so I just wanted to record this video to go over the process of how you use those tools and kind of what we're using them for. So I'll turn it over to Becky for a quick introduction.
Hello, everybody. I'm Becky Huckabee. I'm one of the two JBBS program managers for the BHA. I manage the JBBS program along with my colleague, Kelly Russell. Kelly couldn't be here today, so you got me. Kelly and I have been managing the JBBS program for about the last 5.5 years, and we've been working with Alex this last year to really revamp the JBBS program. So thanks, Alex, for this video.
Yeah, thanks, Becky. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you all can see what I'm talking about with the monthly contract monitoring tool. All right, so this tool goes out usually about the first of the month. It goes out to everybody who's on the distribution list for like a program coordinator for a jail. Some facilities have multiple people on the mailing list. Some facilities only have one person on the mailing list. So if you want to get on the recipient list for this, just send me a quick email and say, hey, Alex, can I get added to the list, the email list for the monthly contract monitoring tool? And that'll go out once a month, usually on the first of the month. Then it's due about 20 days later on the 20th of the month for the previous month. So like we're in April right now, it's April 21st. The March monthly contract monitoring tool went out April 1st and it was due April 20th. So it's always asking about the month previous, right? Because we want those numbers to be complete from the prior month. So that's how that works. There's also a quarterly survey that goes out, and the quarterly survey, you know, there are 4 quarters every year: January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. And so it goes out at the end of each of those quarters, and there's usually 40 days to complete, so it's a little bit longer. And the quarterly survey had questions that used to be on the monthly contract monitoring tool, but instead of having everybody answer those questions each month, we still need that information, but we can put it in the quarterly survey, and then you only have to answer those questions once every 3 months. So it was a way for us to cut down on the number of questions that are on the monthly contract monitoring tool. Both are really, really important. The monthly contract monitoring tool is more about kind of data about the program, right, that we're going to use on a month-to-month basis. The quarterly survey is more about, you know, evaluating the program. How do you feel about it? Share some success stories, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to cover the quarterly survey in this video. It's pretty self-explanatory, and it takes the same, it's a Google form just like this monthly contract monitoring tool. So if you do have any questions about that, just email me, email your program manager, Becky or Kelly, and we can answer any questions you might have, take you through it step by step, that kind of thing. So a couple of things about the monthly contract monitoring tool. We do have a PDF that has a list of all the questions. So if you are working with multiple people in your facility to collect this information, and you kind of want to distribute the list of questions around, let me know. I've got a PDF copy of that. I can share that with you pretty easily. We'll put that up. We're revamping our website very soon, and when we do, we're going to put that in the training materials list. So it'll be up there on the website. This video will be up there on the website. I have a Civicor document that goes over how to do stuff in Civicor. That'll be up on the website. So we're aiming to get everything kind of located on the website, so you can always kind of go back and watch these videos, look at these documents as needed, okay, including the list of questions here and the Civicor pathway stuff. So anyway, again, this is a Google form. You don't need to have a Gmail address to be able to use the form. You just have to have a valid email address, and that's really important. It's going to ask you, like, for this valid email address. This is the email that if at the bottom of the form, this is really important. Once you're done filling it out, there's a little checkbox at the bottom that says, please send me a copy for my records. It's really important that you have an email that works with this. It doesn't have to be a Gmail, but not every email address works with this. So you have to kind of double check that. If you check that box and for some reason it doesn't send you a copy, just email me or your program manager, and we have copies of everybody's submission. So I can always send that back to you. Send you a PDF copy of it. Okay, so but that's what the valid email is asking for at the beginning is, hey, when you're done and you want to copy this, what email do you want this to be sent to, right? So that's really important. The date, again, self-explanatory. We track kind of when people submit it, kind of keeping an eye on people who submitted on time versus people who are regularly late. So that's part of this process. One of the questions that we ask is, what's your facility's average daily population, your ADP for this month? You know, most facilities, they calculate this each month, and it's real easy to just put in there 38 or 472 or whatever it may be. This allows us, right now, we're not using this for the tools that we put together quite yet, but we're going to start using this because this helps us determine the size of the facility. And again, if a facility has a much smaller average daily population this month than they did last month, then that might change the size of the facility. So we're trying to use this ADP to make sure that we're properly categorizing jails and facilities in the right place, right? Large, medium, small, extra small. So that's what that is. And again, instead of kind of having that on a yearly basis, we want that on a monthly basis so we can update that in the future and make it a little more useful. Next, you select which county you're coming from. You can only select one county. So if you're working with multiple counties, you do one spread monthly contract monitoring tool for each county, right? So you'll do one, let's say you're working with Adams and Arapahoe, right? So you do one for Adams, fill it out with all that information, submit it, and then you do another one for Arapahoe. The great thing about the link that gets sent out is anybody can use it, and you can use it multiple times. So you don't need, if you're working with 3 different counties, you don't need 3 different links. You can use the same link 3 times and select a different county. This should be up to date, has every county listed on here. It's quite a long list. If for some reason, right, you're like, hey, I don't see my county on here, let me know. We can add that, we can change that, easy peasy. Down here in the last question of the first section, it's asking you who your contact is. Right now, it should be Becky or Kelly. There are very few, if any, counties that are working with both. Now, you might work with both on different things, but every county should have a designated program manager, a BHA contact. So this is, we're just kind of keeping track of who it is you're working with as your primary point of contact. So that's the entry section, the very first one. The second section, these are program questions. This is where it gets really important. This is one of the reasons I wanted to record this video. First of all, it's really important. We defined unduplicated individual to mean an individual who should be counted only once, regardless of how many medications or services they receive. So for example, someone who attends multiple group sessions and multiple individual sessions in a given month should only be counted once in a question that asks for unduplicated individual. So let's say they're going to an individual session each week, and they're going to 2 group sessions a month, right? That's 6 things that they've attended for JBBS, right? But they're only going to be counted once, right? So that's what we mean by unduplicated individual. This first question is one of the most important because it really doesn't get captured anywhere else. It's how many unduplicated individuals receive JBBS services this month. I call this the big umbrella question. So this is everybody in your facility who's been been touched by JBBS dollars, right? Every individual who's entered the facility and has been touched by JBBS dollars. Now, maybe they don't get admitted to the program for whatever reason, but they get a backpack, or they get Narcan, or they get, maybe they do have one individual session before they get released. So you're not going to formally admit them to JBBS, which is a kind of a longer process, right? So they don't get admitted, but they still get they're still touched by JBBS dollars in some way. We want to count them in this question. This allows us to kind of look at every facility and say, okay, this is how JBBS money is being spent. This is how many people are being touched by these dollars, which is different than how many people are formally admitted to the program, right? So for question two is a subset of question 1. So question 1 is always the bigger number. Question 2 is, of those individuals that receive services, how many unduplicated individuals receive MAT services or programming, including medication? So in some facilities, JBBS is helping to pay for medication for MAT patients, but nothing else. So, and that's okay, but we want to document that in here. We want to say, okay, how many people who have been touched by JBBS dollars, of all those people, how many were receiving MAT services or medications, right? And I know this can get kind of complicated. Like in some facilities, for example, JBBS is paying for half of the MAT medications. The other half of the funding is coming from somewhere else. So the best way to calculate this then for this number would be, okay, how many people got MAT medications? Let's say it's 100, and then take 50% of that. So that'd be 50. So for this question, if you're not doing anything else with MAT people except JBBS is paying for half of the medication, budget, then you'd say, okay, 50 people, because we have 100 total, and 50% of them, 50% of the money is from JBBS. So 50% of these people got their meds paid for by JBBS. Okay. Or if it's 30%, then you take the total number and say, okay, 30% of that bigger number. This is a newer question. We just added this because we want to be really clear about how much of JBBS's money is being spent on MAT individuals. Even if they're not admitted to JBBS, are they getting MAT medications? Are they getting MAT services, right? Is that being paid for with JBBS? This is how we document it, okay? Question 3, again, question 3 is a subset of question 1. So question 1 is always the big umbrella. How many people got touched by services? That includes people that are admitted. And so question 3 is specifically how many unduplicated individuals were admitted to the JBBS program this month, right? So you may have given out some backpacks and some boots and paid for some housing for, a bunch of people, but only 5 people were formally admitted actually admitted to the JBBS program. So the answer here would be 5, right? And by formally admitted, that means they get entered into CivicCorps and they get a gain. Those are the 2 things that really denote somebody being formally admitted, right? Not only are they admitted to CivicCorps, but they have open a new referral for them. They're documented in CivicCorps, right, as a referral, and then they get a gain. So that's what we mean by admitted to JBBS. And I'll talk more about the stuff in CivicCorps later. The other thing to keep in mind for CivicCorps is we still want you to use CivicCorps for people that are referred but not admitted, as well as people that are referred and admitted. So anybody who's a candidate for JBBS should be entered into the CivicCorps system, right? Even if they're not admitted, they should still go in there as a client, start a new referral, check one of the options that says they weren't admitted, basically, then you save and submit. It shouldn't take more than 5 minutes to do that for an individual. And again, I'll talk about that in a few minutes, but it's really important to document everybody who gets referred to the program, whether they're admitted or not, okay? And those numbers we can kind of double check in CivicCorps, but here we have it on the tool because we want to hear it from you. How many people did you admit to the program this month? And then anybody who gets admitted gets a gain. So question 4, again, a subset of question 1, how many gain assessments were administered to JBS clients this month? That number should roughly match the answer to question 3. So if you had 5 people admitted in a month, you should have about 5 gains in a month. If you had 20 people admitted in a month, you should have about 20 gains. Now, sometimes somebody can get admitted, like let's say on the last day of the month, and maybe they don't get their gain until the first day of the next month. That's fine. It doesn't have to be 1-to-1. They don't have to match exactly. But what we don't want to see is we have 35 people admitted and 5 gains administered. That's a big discrepancy, and that's going to lead to a conversation with us about, hey, what's going on with this situation? Because anybody who gets admitted to JBBS should be getting a gain within 2 weeks. And typically you want to get that gain within a day or 2, as soon as possible, kind of thing, right? And then we use all of those numbers to kind of track, like, hey, this is how many people JBBS is paying for. This is how many people have been admitted. This is how many people are getting gains. So it allows us to have kind of conversations amongst ourselves and with you as the facility people to make sure we're all on the same page. The next set of questions is about released from custody. So how many of your facilities clients were JBBS clients were released from custody this month? So how many people that were in JBBS were let out of the facility? That's what that question's asking about. And then based on the number of people that were released this month, how many returned to custody this month? So if you had 5 people released and 2 of them came back, then the answer to number 5 is 5 people released, and the answer to number 6 is 2, right? Because 2 of those people that were released this month came back in the same month. Then we have another one that says, okay, based on the number of clients released in the past 12 months, how many people have returned to custody? And this is really just asking if somebody was in JBBS in the prior year at all, and they were released, how many of them came back this month, right? Not last month, not 6 months ago. How many people came back this month that were released anytime in the previous year? Okay. This number is usually pretty small, right? But we still want to track it because it's one of the things that we're looking at in terms of recidivism. Now, we've got other things that we're looking at for recidivism, but this question helps us track it from each facility. And again, if those numbers that are getting reported here don't match what we're seeing elsewhere, like in Civicor, that allows us to have a conversation about, hey, it looks like you're getting a lot more people are coming back than what you think you are, right? Or whatever it may be. So just make sure, again, and the easiest way to track that is when you enter somebody into Civicor, right? If they show up and they were referred and admitted within the past year, then you mark them in this question, right? The great thing about Civicor is you enter somebody in there and it holds that record for an indefinite amount of time. So if you go to enter somebody again and they're already in there, they've been there before. Now you just have to check what their last referral date was. And if it was in the last year, then you record them in that question right there. Okay. I know those couple of questions could be confusing. So if you ever want to talk about it more, or you want more of a breakdown on why it's important or anything like that, just let us know. We can have that conversation. The next couple of questions are really important too. Does your program utilize individual sessions, group sessions, or both? A lot of facilities have both. Some have just individual, some have just group. So here you're just telling us, which one it is, right? You're saying, oh, we have, and this is multiple choice. So you say, oh, we just have individual sessions. Oh, we have group sessions. Oh, we have both, or we have neither. There are some really small facilities that don't have either. So this just allows us to kind of, okay, what does your JBBS program offer, right? And then please list all the group sessions that occurred this month. If you don't have to list them, like, let's say you had 9 of one session, 8 of another session, and 6 of another type of session. You just say that 9 of this, 8 of this, 6 of this, right? You don't have to list like every single one unless they're all different from one another, which is pretty rarely the case. But that just gives us, this list here allows us to say, okay, this is the type of group sessions that are being offered in each facility. And then it asks for the number. So what number of JBBS sessions occurred this month, right? And then what number of individual sessions occurred this month. That's going to be really helpful when we're putting together our reporting. How many individual sessions were offered across all JBBS facilities in the past fiscal year. We're using this number to calculate that, right? How many group sessions were offered in all JBBS facilities over the past year. We're using this number to calculate that. So that's why we're asking for specific numbers there. It's also really important when it says, please provide just one number, even if it's 0. Again, don't list out, well, we had 19 of these and 17 of these and whatever. When it asks for just one number, just add them together and provide one number, because that goes into a spreadsheet. And then I take out those numbers, add them up, put them in pretty graphs and charts and tables and all that stuff. But I can't do that if it's more than one number, right? So that's what these are asking for. And then at the bottom here, it just says, look, if you have any immediate needs or concerns with your program, please contact your JBBS program manager directly via email. And this is really important because we don't want to be learning about issues from the monthly contract monitoring tool, right? If there's a major issue, we want you to email your program manager so we can have that conversation and get that worked out sooner than later. Okay, so that's why we put this note here. This next section is on MAT reporting. Again, unduplicated individual means that somebody should only be counted once. For example, someone who receives MAT medication on a daily basis should only be counted once in the question. So does your facility currently provide MAT services utilizing JBBS funds? Again, it's yes, no, yes or no. If your facility has those services, do you currently offer these 3 medications, right? Yes, no, no. Or, we have no MAT services provided by JBBS, right? That's an option here too. This just allows us to track, okay, which are using. Briefly explain how you intend to spend any JBBS funds for MAT services this month. This would include medications that aren't listed here, right? The big three, right? If you're doing in long-term injectables, if you're doing other kinds, if you're offering Narcan, if you're paying for that with JBBS, right? You just mention that here in this section. And again, it's brief. You don't have to spend, you don't have to write an essay explaining it. Just what are you spending these JBBS funds on? What other medications? What other services? What's that? What are those dollars, those JBBS dollars being spent on in terms of the MAT treatments, right? And services. Okay, then number 4, this one's really important. How many individuals in your facility received MAT treatment or programming this month that was paid for with JBBS? I put a note in here too. This number should match the number provided for question 2 in the previous section. We added that question 2 because we were starting to get some really different numbers from some facilities. So I wanted to just ask that above, right, in that previous section, of the total number of people who were touched by JBBS dollars, how many of them got MAT services, right? That's why I put it right underneath that other question so that it flows from one to the next. But we kept it here in the MAT reporting section. So it should be the same number, right? However many people get touched by JBBS dollars for MAT services get recorded in that previous section, and they get recorded here. Again, maybe in the future, if we get more consistent reporting on some of this and everybody's on the same page, we might be able to take out that earlier question. But for now, we were just getting such wildly different responses from some facilities that I really wanted to clarify what we meant by how many people are being, receiving MAT treatment or programming that's paid for by JBBS. So that goes here and in the section above. And then this next one, how many individuals receiving MAT treatment paid for by JBS were released this month and were provided with resources to continue treatment after release? So, and I put a star here to explain, the question is not asking you to track or follow up with individuals to verify that they received MAT services after release. That'd be a wildly, difficult thing to do given the resources we have. It's just saying, did they receive information from you or your facility about how they might continue MAT treatment in the community before they're released? In most facilities, that's everybody. Everybody who gets MAT treatment gets some sort of information upon when they're about to get released. That's like, here, this is how you can continue to get MAT services once you're released from the facility. We just want to track that here. Okay, so if every single person who gets MAT services is getting this kind of exit consultation, exit review, where they're being provided with, a booklet or a pamphlet or some information, they count here, right? If that's not what you're doing in your facility, you might want to consider doing that so that everybody who gets MAT treatment when they get released is getting some form of contact that says, hey, when you're out, go here if you want to continue getting MAT treatment, right? This is part of what we call the continuity of care. And we're trying to focus on that in the upcoming fiscal year and moving forward. How are we handing off people from release that are receiving these services in the facility? How are we handing them off to community providers and community resources? Like, how are we handling that transition? Because I think we all agree we could do better and we want to do better so that when people get out, they can still get the help they need. Because if they don't, as you know, and I know, we know, right, they're more likely to come back. And that's what we want to eliminate. So the problem is we could do a great job in the facility providing services, medications, all these other things. And then when they're released, if they don't have those resources out in the community, the chances that they come back go up. So it doesn't matter how good we do in the facility with the program if we're not handing them off to these community providers and resources, because then they're just going to come back anyway. So this is what we're getting at here. We're trying to demonstrate, yeah, all these people who get released, they're provided resources before their release to allow them, they at least know where to go or what to do to continue that treatment once they're out of the facility. Okay. And then finally, we have the budget questions. Has your program lost any staff this month? This is a really easy yes or no. Are you currently fully staffed? If not, when do you anticipate being fully staffed? In the next 30 days, in the next 1 to 2 months, 2+ months, unknown. How many positions do you intend to hire for? 1, 2, 3, or more? What position titles and job duties are there for these planned new hires? And so these 5 questions, these will really help us kind of understand what's going on in a facility, right? We're trying to track, because again, the efficiency of the program, right, can really be undermined if you're not fully staffed, right? If you only have 2 people working your facility, you're supposed to have 5. You can't handle the same numbers that you could handle if you have 5 people. So this allows us to kind of get at that so that we're kind of looking at facilities on a more even playing field. We're leveling the playing field so that we're treating, okay, this facility has been understaffed for 6 months. Their numbers have been low for 6 months, but we have an explanation for why that might be. So if anybody comes to us and says, hey, why is, this facility, this county's facility, why is their JBBS numbers drop so dramatically? We can look at this and say, hey, they've been understaffed. They need 2 or 3 people, right? Instead of just 1, they've been understaffed for a long time, and this is why, right? So it helps us kind of explain any discrepancies in some of those numbers. And it also helps us have those conversations with you. What do you need? What can we do for you? If you're ever hiring for a position, let us know. We can put that on the JBBS website. And so, if somebody's coming to check out the JBBS, what's going on, they can see that position listing. It's always good to put those postings in as many places as you can, right? Kind of get the word out. And we're always happy to help do that if we can. Okay, so that's what those questions are. Then it says, please provide a brief explanation of what JBBS funds have been used for this month. Again, brief explanation, just what are you spending the JBBS money on? How much of it is going to salaries? How much of it is going to supplies? How much of it is going to rent assistance? Whatever it may be, whatever you're spending that money on, just a brief, again, you've got the invoice, we've got the invoices, you're submitting those. This is just kind of a bird's eye picture, a broad overview of how the JBBS money is getting spent from month to month, right? Just like in the previous section with the MAT money, what's MAT money being spent on? This is, okay, what's JBBS money being spent on? And again, that just allows us to kind of review what's going on a month-to-month basis, so we have a little bit more context for how your facility's operating. Next question, do you anticipate any issues with spending the budget, right? If it's no, then we move right on. If it's yes, then we know, hey, we got to have a conversation with this county. If so, what are those issues? So if we see that, yeah, we're anticipating issues with spending our budget, we get a little more context here in this next question about what those issues might be, right? And as it says here, if you need help or recommendations on how to expend all of your contracted amount, contact your program managers. I've been in multiple meetings with both Becky and Kelly where they've made really great recommendations on what things can be spent on. We can have those conversations, right, about hey, you're underspent for where you're supposed to be at this point in the contract. What can we do? Maybe it's making an investment in some injectables for next year. Maybe it's equipment. Maybe it's supplies. Maybe it's there's various options, and the best way to kind of deal with that is not to just, oh, we're going to be underspent and walk away, but like have a conversation with the program managers, and we can always, they can help, and I can contribute a little bit too. We can help you figure out how to spend that stuff effectively. Number 9, have your staff members attended any trainings this month? This just helps us kind of understand if your staff is doing that continuing training kind of thing. And then if so, what trainings did they attend? Again, just gives us some context for, well, what's the staff in your facility doing? What are they doing for ongoing professional development and that kind of thing? It just, again, helps us paint a picture of what's going on in the facility. And it's always better to paint a picture where things aren't standing still, but where, people are constantly expanding. They're trying to do more. They're trying to understand more, trying to get trained up. They're trying to get certifications. They're doing more than the minimum, right? This helps us demonstrate that. And then finally, this kind of catch-all question at the end, is there anything else that you'd like to mention or share with JBBS program managers? If not, just put an A. So all these questions are required, but if you don't have something to answer, you can always just put 0 or NA, right? So that in order to submit the form, there has to be something entered in each question. But again, if you don't have an answer to put, you can always just put 0 or NA. And I tried to really denote that in the questions themselves. So everything should be pretty clear there. I just really wanted to get into, especially this section 2 and section 3, kind of the numbers based stuff, because that's what I'm mostly responsible for, is making sure that these numbers come in, that they're accurate, and that everybody who's filling out these forms knows what we're asking for those numbers, right? Because our ability to show what you all are doing in your facility hinges on this report, right? Your ability to fill out this report, know what we're asking for, report it accurately. Then we collect all that and we build up We build the annual report with this information. We are going to be using it for the dashboard. We use it for other kinds of reports. I've had multiple counties come to us and say, hey, we're meeting with our county commissioners. Can we get a quick report on our numbers for the past year, right? All that stuff is really, really important. And we want to make sure that we've got accurate information so that when somebody asks us or when you ask us, we can turn around and give you those numbers and make it really clear, okay? So that's what I have to say about the monthly contract monitoring tool. Again, if there are any questions about it, let me know. If you want the list of questions, let me know. And I'm happy to talk about this or the quarterly survey or anything else like that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this. I'm going to switch over to Civicor. And so at this point, we're going to switch gears to talk about Civicor and how to enter somebody into Civicor. So I can't go back to the last page. The client, if you click on this, it's like the client homepage and it'll show your list of all clients. I don't want to provide anybody's PII, so I'm not going to do that here. This is just our test client right here. But on the previous page, if you click on that client master list, up in the corner, there's an add new client button. So if you add a new client, it'll come up with this basically. It'll ask for their name, their ID, their date of birth, gender, phone number, ethnicity, and any notes if you have them. And so when you enter somebody in, this is where it'll tell you, hey, this person already exists in the system. You've already entered this client, which means they're in Civicor from, I think Civicor goes back to 2011 or 2012. Not in every facility, but the system itself is that old. So we've got, 13, 14 years worth of data. So it's possible that somebody hasn't been in for 10 years. They're still in the Civicor system because they were in here 10 years ago. So everybody who gets referred to JBBS, it depends on the facility, right? Each facility has different kind of policies and procedures. Some of the smaller facilities, it's like everybody who comes into the jail, right? It's like, hey, do you want to do JBBS, right? Some of the medium and larger facilities, it's from a kite system, right? Somebody hears about it or they read about it somewhere and they're like, hey, I'm interested. So they send out a kite and then they get referred. That's what we call a referral. So what you got to do is first step is enter a new client. So you put their information in here. Again, if they're already in the system, you just make sure that that information's up to date and you save it. If they're not in the system, then you enter this information in. Okay. And then so now they're in there as a client. That's step one. Step two is to refer to them to the program, right? So you add a new referral here. Bring up this screen here, right? So you put in the referral date, right? Put in their booking date. Let's say they came in last week, but they were just referred today, right? And then you put in a screening date and say, okay, we screen them to see whether or not they should, whether they're eligible for JBBS, whether they really want to do it on this day. Then this next list of questions is really important. First of all, are they eligible for services, right? In some facilities, it might be a no, right? They might say, hey, I really want to do this. And for whatever reason, they're not going to be eligible. Maybe they're going to be transferred to DOC next week. Maybe they have had disciplinary concerns already. Maybe they have been violent with a staff member, right? A facility staff member, right? Something like that, in which case they're not eligible. And so you just click no, you click submit and save. Now that person is in here as being referred, but not admitted, right? And that's going to be really important in just a second. I'll explain why. But so now we've said, yeah, this person's entered in as a client, but then they were referred and not admitted. So you just click submit, boom, and you're done, right? If they are eligible, you click yes, it pops up the next question. Okay, did they decline participation? There are some people that are eligible. They might even show interest. And then when they hear, okay, you've got to do this assessment, you're going to meet with somebody and they're like, you know what, I don't really want to do this. So then you say decline participation. You say, yes, they declined, right? And that's it. Then you click submit, saves it. And again, the system will show them as being referred, but not admitted. Okay. Now, if they don't decline, they're like, yeah, no, I want to do it. Then you click, no, they didn't decline. Then it has this next question. Was the client released before being admitted to JBS? This happens a lot, right? Where somebody will be eligible, they'll want to do it, and then they get out on bail two days later, right? So they've still been referred, right? But you can't admit them, you can't give them a gain, you can't do these other things. So you've referred them, you've done all this, and you say, okay, were they released before being admitted? You say yes, right? And then you submit and save. So once again, the system will say, okay, this is somebody who's been referred but not admitted. Okay. If they have not been released, you say no, and now it opens up the rest of the form. And this is where somebody gets admitted. If they're eligible, they didn't decline, and they weren't released early, then they can be admitted. All right, yay, hooray! They can be admitted. So then you put in admission date. Were they enrolled in JBBS in this or another facility in the past 3 years? You can ask them that, right? You could say yes or no or unknown if you can't get the answer. Were they discharged from JBBS services? This is like when they're done, right? You say, yep, they're discharged. If you do that, it's going to ask you some other questions about their discharge. While they're still active, you can just leave it as no, right? Were they released from jail? Nope, they're still here, right? Then it's going to ask for your diagnoses. There's a bunch of different options here. There's also none, right? Or you can have unspecified mental health or unspecified substance abuse. You have to enter something, right? But if you don't have a diagnosis, an official diagnosis, you can just put none or unspecified, right? And that's okay. It asks for 2 diagnoses, right? So if you only have one, then you just select none for the other, and that'll satisfy the requirement to answer it with something, right? And then if there's something else that's not in the dropdown, there's a space here for you to enter that in here. We're not using this information. This is for you to track and keep track of. Then it's going to say, okay, in terms of the screening, did they get a gain 3.2? Because if they've been admitted, let's say they're admitted today, right? So if they're admitted, they got to get a gain. So then it says, did you complete a gain? Yes or no, right? You say, yes, we did it. It'll ask for the date. You say, yeah, we did it today. It'll ask, did you screen them for TBI, traumatic brain injury? Yes, no, we attempted to, or they refused. And then this really simple question, have they ever been diagnosed? So maybe they don't want to be screened, but you can ask, hey, have you ever been diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury, right? So if you say, they refused to do the formal screening, but we asked them this question, and they said yes, then you can still answer that, and boom, it'll collect that information. Then there's this whole section on the LSI. Again, this is not required. This is if you want to use the LSIR, if you want to, because a lot of facilities continue to do this, if you want to put those scores in here, right, we have this space for you. You'll notice none of this has a red star next to it. Anything with a red star is required. None of this has a red star. Same thing with transition tracking, right? Which is to say, okay, did you, 1 month after they're released, right, did you contact them, and if so, and usually this, again, when you go back to the client, has their phone number spaced there, right? You want to make sure you can get that if you can, because then you can call them 1 month afterwards and say, hey, are you still in treatment, right? Or what's going on, and there's these various options: deceased, in treatment, new crime or regress, not applicable, not in treatment, status unknown, or treatment has been completed. So you can, and again, this is not required, but we strongly recommend that you do this tracking, right? At 1 month, 2 months, 6 month, and 12-month intervals. Again, this gets us at that kind of continuity of care where we're checking in on them. And then, if they're not in treatment, you're like, hey, what's going on? Do you need resources? Do you need a reference, right? Stuff like that. That helps with you knowing what's going on. It helps with us kind of know what's going on. This is going to become really important going forward, but we're not requiring it as of yet. Because again, the resources don't exist in every jail to be able to do this with everybody. We understand that, but it's really helpful to get this information. So if you have this person, they're still in the facility, they haven't been released yet, right? You've filled out all this stuff, then you click submit, boom, and it saves it. It saves them. Now they're going to show up as being referred and admitted to the program. Okay. And then once they go through everything and they finish the treatment, then you can say, okay, was the client discharged from JBBS services? Yes. It'll bring up this new box for discharge. You can say, okay, they're discharged on this date. They were successfully discharged. Boom. And then you save it. And then it'll show them as being referred, admitted, and successfully discharged, right? If you go unsuccessful, right, then it'll ask, okay, what's the reason for that? Well, maybe they disengaged from jail. Maybe there's an in-house disciplinary action. Maybe it's other. And if it's other, you click on that and it'll allow you to type it in. If you do this, right, and save it, then it'll say, okay, they've been referred, admitted, and unsuccessfully discharged from the program, right? And those are all kind of things that we're looking at on the back end. and helps us kind of keep track of like, hey, what's the program doing? All right. So that's Civicor in a nutshell. There's also the services tab. If you want to enter, there's a whole bunch of different services that you can say, okay, this service has been rendered, right? This is the type of contact, the service provided, right? There's all these options here, MAT, assessment, all this different stuff. So you can kind of keep track of the services they're receiving while they're in JBBS. You can put notes in here, et cetera, et cetera. We don't require these services. This is more for you all to kind of keep track of things if you need it. If you don't, then you don't have to worry about this part, okay? But there's the services is here for you to use if you want to. What we require is the basic info of the client and the referral, specifically, you know, are they eligible? Did they decline? Did they get released early? And then were they discharged, right? Those are the things that we're really, really interested in. And all this other information that's got a red star is required, but those are the things that are most important for us to be able to track. So that's Civicor in a nutshell. I have this document here. I'm going to share this tab. This is the Civicor, what we call JBBS pathways Civicor process. And there's 7 different potential pathways. And we just talked about all of them in the Civicor thing, but this just gives you a step-by-step of how to go through and enter stuff based on what pathway somebody is on in the JBBS program. So again, these will be up on the website. If you can't find them or you need access, just let us know. We can send these out easy peasy. The reason that we're so interested in this stuff, and this will be the last thing before we're done, on the website, and again, we're revamping the website, so this will go in a different place, but on the website, we have the dashboard. The dashboard pulls information from Civicor, right? So it's looking at referrals and admits over time, right? Referrals is in red, admits is in blue. You can see there's always more referrals than admits, right? So this helps us track, you know, what percentage of people are admitted. You know, on the low end here, we've got 15% of people that are referred are also admitted. On the high end, we've got 100%. The thing is, you want to be about, you know, between 80 and 90. You don't want to be all the way up at 100, right? Because that means everybody who's being referred is being admitted. And you don't want to be on the low end because that means the majority of people who are referred are not being admitted. So we kind of want to find that sweet spot. And the reason for that is when the last window here is the 1-year recidivism rate. When we're looking at this recidivism rate, we're looking at the red line is people that are referred but not admitted. And the blue line are people that are referred and admitted. So we're saying, okay, people that are admitted to the program are showing up less often than people who are referred but not admitted to the program, which again suggests we have similar people because everybody who gets referred is going to look pretty similar, right? So these two similar categories of people, the people who are admitted to the program, people who are going into JBBS, receiving JBBS services, are less likely to come back to the facility to show up again in the JBBS database than those people who are referred and not admitted. And that information comes from Civicor. So all those people that declined participation, weren't eligible, got released early, they'll all fall into this red line category. Whereas everybody who does not and gets admitted falls into this blue category. And then eventually we're going to look at successful versus unsuccessful discharges. And we're going to say, is it more likely that somebody who successfully discharged from the program, are they less likely to come back to the facility than somebody who unsuccessfully discharged from the program? So that's why those things become so important. On the back end, when we're looking at this, we're creating these dashboards, we're looking at these metrics. That's the data that we're using. We're using Civicor to be able to generate these analyses. And you can see, right, like, you know, we have an 8% readmission rate for admitted people versus a 28% readmittance rate for just referrals. That's a 20% difference. That's a huge difference, right? It gets a lot smaller here. There's a reason for this little blip. It's one county in particular. We don't need to go into detail, but you know, there's some data stuff going on here. But generally speaking, right, the blue line is lower than the red line, which means somebody who is in the program is less likely to come back to the facility. They're less likely to be referred to JBBS again. That's a victory. That means JBBS is working on some level. And in order for us to show that, we need to have people in the system that have been admitted. We need to have people in the system that have not been admitted, referred but not admitted. And then later on, we're going to need people that are successfully discharged and people that are unsuccessfully discharged to be able to compare those categories to one another. So that gives you a kind of overview of how to use the monthly contract monitoring tool. And that dashboard, again, the goal next year is to start pulling in information from the monthly contract monitoring tool. So it will reflect not just Civicor, but also the monthly contract monitoring tool numbers, right? So that's an overview of monthly contract monitoring tool, Civicor, and the dashboard, so that you just have a general idea of kind of what we're using these things for. The dashboard is a really useful tool. If you ever want to kind of talk through it or get a kind of tutorial on that, let me know. I'm happy to take you through that step by step as well. We use it all the time, and I think it's going to be really useful to the facilities as well. So anyway, thank you so much for your time. I know that's a little long-winded, but there's a lot of information to cover. And like I said before, if you have any questions, if there's anything that we can do for you, anything that we can answer, just let us know. And in the meantime, reach out to Becky, Kelly, or myself. And just thanks so much for your time. Thanks for paying attention. And I'm sure we'll see you in the meetings.